Recording. Okay, good evening, Marta. It's lovely to see everyone again, having seen most of you yesterday. Obviously not Mrs. Kirschblum, but or other people in Israel. I think we were having some joining us. Not sure if they've joined us or not. Seemingly, it's really the last of our Ellul Tishrei series, although arguably we could go on to Hoshana Rabbah as we continue with David Hashem. We continue paying that to Hoshana Rabbah, so we could keep going, but we're giving ourselves a break during Holomoed and Sukkot. And this week, the last of our series, I'm delighted to welcome Mrs. Sepha Kirschblum, who teaches in a number of other places, but where I think I first encountered her was through Web Yeshiva, not having gone to any of the SEMs. I think that's probably the place where I'm most likely to encounter you. Although I do know some of your colleagues at Midrashet Amit, which I think is also another major area. Mr. Kirschblum teaches Tanakh and Jewish thought in a number of places and has been involved in putting across, I think, probably a positive spin. And I think probably more importantly, certainly what I've heard from a number of people is a love of Torah and a love of learning, which I think is so crucial. And as with many people we seem to encounter these days, graduated initially from Stern College, and I do believe I have a cousin who's a professor at Stern College. Must check that one out, but not that I know her married name, that it may not help us. Can't think of her married name anyhow. But without further ado, because it's more interesting to listen to our speaker than anything else, the title of the talk today is Making the Worst Day of Your Life into the Best. And what I will do is, if I can continue, because I think it's sort of nothing personal, but I think if you become a key person, if you want to share the screen, I can actually make you co-host, which I think is probably the best way to deal with it. There you are. And you should be able to be able to share things, right? I'll put myself on mute. I won't vanish because I think it's always unfair too. But I love seeing Sforim behind people. I sort of try and read them. I should put my glasses on. Right, I will pass on rather than stare at Sforim.
Perfect. Thank you, Rabbi Wilkinson. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm so excited to be here for you guys to get to learn this with me. Because for me, this is my joy, my happy place. Exactly as Rabbi Wilkinson said, I love Tanakh, I love Torah, and I love teaching. So I'm so excited to share this with you tonight. Yes, we just ended the Yamim Noraim and we just finished Yom Kippur, and we're probably even still feeling the aftershocks of the fast. I feel like it's something the body really retains for at least 24 hours, whether you had insomnia last night, with majority of us who, whether we had our coffee or not, just stay up so late. But either way, the days of awe stay with us for a while. So as we enter into our excitement of Sukkot, I don't want us to lose also that excitement of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So tonight I wanted to learn together the story of Cain and Hevel, which is something we're going to read in a few weeks, pretty soon. But I think their messages, and Cain specifically, number one, I think he's a often misunderstood character, personally one of my favorites. But also helps us understand where we're going to take what we hopefully internalized over Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Slichot, and that entire time period. So I want to just quickly recap before we enter into Cain and Hevel to where we just left off, right? If we go back into the Chumash in Sefer Bereshit, right, Adam and Chava were only given one rule, to not eat from the Eitz Hadat or the Eitz HaChaim, depending on how you interpret it. They were not supposed to eat from that tree. And ultimately, the Nachash, the snake, convinced Chava to take from the tree. She eats from the tree, and then she brings to Adam. They eat from the tree, and immediately they realize that they are naked, and they hide. And God comes to them, and the famous question of God to the people, Adam Ayaka, where are you? Right? And all of a sudden we see the first story in world history of guilt, right? How they handle guilt and tshuva. And what's so interesting is everybody just points the finger, right? Adam is asked, Ayaka, he says, I was hiding. We realized we were naked. I had to go into hiding. Then he points the finger at Chava. right? The woman you gave me, God, she gave me the fruits, right? Hashem turns to Chava and said, what have you done? She says, that Nachash, he convinced me, that snake convinced me. And ultimately, humanity got two major punishments, which are in front of you. Right, the punishments for Adam and Chava, first in Pasuk Tzayin, this is from Perek Gimel, chapter 3. El Ha'isha Amar, and Hashem says to the woman, Harba arbe etzvonech vehironech be'etzev, tildi banim ula Adam Amar b'itzavon tochlena kol yimei chayecha. Right, and so in a big vacuum of a picture, women are punished with the challenges and pains of both childbirth and childbearing, right? All of the elements of kids in a large extent, and men have this responsibility of taking care of the family, financial burdens of being the caretaker of their families. And it seems like, I'm not belittling it in no way do I look back at pregnancy and say, oh, I wish I could do that every other day. I totally appreciate that it is a punishment, but it's a real introduction to what humanity and life is going to be like for humans. Now they are getting kicked out of Gan Eden. And now we're going to enter into Perek Daled, and I'm going to go slower. So I'm sorry I was a little fast before, but Perek Daled to me, number one, is magical. Number two, teaches so many ideas on Jewish philosophy, jam-packed into every pasuk. And I think actually teaches us how to study Tanakh. So we're going to go a little slower together, and I hope the share works, right? You can all see, hopefully. Okay, so here we are in Perek Daled. Opens up, Pasuk Aleph, V'ha'adam yada et Chava ishto, v'tahar v'tilet et Kayin, v'tomer kaniti ishat Hashem. And Adam sleeps with his wife Chava. She gets pregnant. She gives birth to Kayin, and she says, I acquired this man with God. Now, I could look at this very quickly, and I'll do it somewhat quickly since we're on a time limit, but this is a very strange phrase, right? V'ha'adam yada et Chava ishto, right? If I just highlight those few words, it's not written in biblical Hebrew, right? Biblical Hebrew I always view as like a little Shakespearean, right? It has that element of non-typical, right? As someone who lives in Israel, I don't talk Tanachi. It would be weird to talk in, Vayomer, Sepha El Ba'ala, right? And Sepha said to her husband, we don't talk with the Vav Hayifuch, which almost all of Torah is written. And when I say almost all of Torah was written, there are only 2 psukim in all 5 books of Torah that are not written what we refer to as the Vav Hayifuch, right? At least for me, it was the 4th grade Hebrew lessons that we were taught as kids, right? Never again to be told, but in 4th grade, we were taught that Yomar means he will say. If you put that cute little Vav Hayifuch in front, it changes it from he will say to and he said. And I don't even know why we had to learn it in 4th grade, and I'm not sure what the purpose was, except for Chumash. Because Torah was written with this Vav Hayifuch. It's almost HaKadosh Baruch Hu's way of trying to say to us, the characters in your story that you are learning about, the story is present to them, but you're in 2023. So in 2023, I want you to understand it took place in the past. Or if someone learned it in 1723, I want them to understand it was in the past. But it's present to the characters we're learning. Except for this pasuk and one pasuk in Perek Tzayin, V'ha'adam yada et Chava ishto. This is written in regular Hebrew, right? This is normal past tense, meaning it's letting us know that the birth of Kayin, the pregnancy of Kayin, and the birth of Kayin took place in Gan Eden, which helps us appreciate the punishment a little bit more, right? I always think of if my mom would have ever punished me and said, Sepha, you can't watch TV tonight, as a kid. If I never watched TV before, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if I'm used to watching television every night and then I'm being punished that I can't watch television, all of a sudden it's a much harsher punishment, right? Helping us understand Chava actually knew what pregnancy could be like before the punishment. She knew what it was like to just get pregnant, have a kid, no pain, no challenge, and just give birth. Because here, based on Pasuk Aleph, Kayin was born in Gan Eden. Kayin was born before the punishment, right? So she has this birth, and then it also helps us understand this name, right? Vatomer, she says, Kaniti ish et Hashem, I acquired man with God, right? And here again, the Mefarshim, I bring Rashi for you here, right? Kimo im Hashem, she's saying, I acquired man with Hashem, kishebara uti et ishi hu levado baranu, aval bazeh shutafim anu imo. Right? Her name of Cain is incredibly empowering. She is saying, does the world understand? I am a creator like God, because my husband and I, right? Adam and Chava don't have parents. They don't have mom or dad, right? They were literally created by God, either from the dust of the earth, or a piece of the first was made into the second. There were no such thing as parents. There was no such thing as a mother and a father. And here, what she's acknowledging is Cain is the first human being to be born with a mother and a father. And therefore, if not for me, this child wouldn't exist, right? So number one, I, Chava, am amazing, right? I am literally godly. And in addition, this child is a wow factor, right? Cain, you are the first human being with parents. You're the first human being that was born normally, right? So when you think of Sefer Breshit, number one, Cain was the firstborn. Number two, with all due respect to my gender, because I think, thank God, times have changed, he's a boy, right? And number three, he's the first human in world history to be born normally, right? Everything is going for this kid, right? Which helps us enter into the meeting of his brother. Pasuk bet. Vatosef laledet et achiv et Hevel. She continues to give birth to his brother, to Hevel. Vayi Hevel roetzon, v'Cain haya oved adama. Hevel was a shepherd, and Cain worked the land. Now, after Pasuk Aleph, meeting Chava, hearing her excitement and her empowerment in the birth of her first child, Pasuk Bet is awkward, right? She continues to give birth to his brother, right? Not her son, but Cain's brother. And it doesn't even tell us why she names him that. She just names him Hevel with no explanation after that major declaration of Cain. And what does the word Hevel mean? It literally means the word nothing, N-O-T-H-I-N-G, right? Or a breath of air, meaning every excitement she felt at Cain, we feel completely depletes when she gives birth to his brother, right? And I imagine each one of you knows exactly where you got your name from, right? I don't think I made it to my teenage years before asking my parents where my name came from, right? So imagine growing up in this house where the firstborn, which we know is super significant, his name means I am the first child that is a partnership of God and a mother and a father. I am number one. And then came my brother. Nothing, right? The insignificant one. And then the text goes out of its way to tell us their jobs, right? It tells us that Hevel is a shepherd and Cain works the land. And even that is quite curious, right? Number one, where do we hear about shepherding? Where is this concept that we would even need to take care of animals? And number two, why is his job mentioned first? Right? The Torah is very into age order, right? Why is Cain's job not mentioned first, right? And there are so many different ideas to take away from it, and many Mefarshim try to start unpacking it, but a lot can just look at it, okay, divide and conquer, right? Let's divide the world of you work the land, I take care of the animals. It sounds lovely, except we saw the first source was the punishment for Adam, and the punishment for Adam was to work the land. And it's so interesting because you look at this pasuk and it almost feels like a continuation of everything we just said. Cain just inherited the family business, and Hevel, it's almost like he just walks off to the side, right? Because in Tanakh, a shepherd is someone who literally takes the sheep off. It almost describes an introvert, someone who just likes to be by themselves with their animals. But so interesting that he separates himself and goes first because he was almost ostracized from the family. That's the impression you're getting from the text here, that Cain keeps the job of the family. He works the land like his dad, But Hevel goes off and does something different, right? But now we get into the main part of our story. Pasuk Gimel. Oh, sorry. Someone have a question? No. Feel free. Feel free to interrupt for a question at any point. Pasuk Gimel. Vayihi miketz yamim, vayavei Kain mipri ha'adama mincha Lashem. So time passes, and according to the text, sounds lovely. Kain brings a gift, right? Mincha, he brings a gift to God of the fruits of the ground, right? He works the land. He's now bringing fruits. Pasuk Dalid, vehevel, hevi gam hu mibchorot sono umechal vehen. Hevel also brings a gift from the first of his sheep, from the fattest. Vayisha Hashem el Hevel ve'el minchato. Hashem turns and accepts the gift of Hevel, but pasuk hey ve'el Kain ve'el minchato lo sha'a. But to Kain and his gift, God does not turn. Vayichar l'Kain ma'od vayiplu panav. This angers Kain tremendously, and his face falls. And now, to me, these 3 psukim are huge from a philosophical, emotional place. But I look at these 2 psukim, and I take away everything I've ever learned before about Kain, and I look at this and I say, what did Kain do wrong? Right? But according to the text, nothing. Right? He brings a gift to God. Then it tells us Hevel also brought a gift. Almost that word gam here, almost highlighting like imitation is the highest form of flattery, right? He watched his brother bring a gift and he's like, oh, that's a really great idea. I'm going to do that too. Brings a gift as well. Now, I cannot deny it brings adjectives to describe Hevel's gift, right? Hevel has beautiful adjectives to describe his gift. Great. They are the fattest. They are the firstborn. I love it. Doesn't tell me anything about Kain's. But when I say it gives no adjectives, it definitely doesn't give negative ones either, right? A lot of people like to quote Rashi here. They must have been rotten. They must have been gross and disgusting. And that's why God didn't accept it. But it doesn't give me any adjectives. Why are we assuming negative when the pshat is just neutral, right? But who should the real question on these psukim be? God. God, you couldn't take a bite of both karbanot, right? It wasn't a question of whose is better. If I'm saying whose is better, then you're right. I agree. Hevel should be accepted and don't accept Kain's. But we believe in general in Judaism, especially after coming off the heels of Yom Kippur yesterday, right? In today's times, we believe that tefillah, that prayer, has replaced the bringing of karbanot, has replaced sacrificial offerings. If I followed the literal translation of this text, I could assume, oh, okay, God only accepts the best. So if that were true, I wouldn't have even attempted going to shul yesterday, right? Because I've got, thank God, 3 little kids all around me. There is no way that my Shmona Esrei was the most focused, attentive, and committed than everyone else in shul. But I went to shul, and I definitely wanted to daven in hopes that Hashem would hear my tefillah and accept my tefillah too. So I look at these 3 psukim and I say, seriously, God? You couldn't accept both karbanot? You couldn't accept Kain's just because his wasn't as good? Like, that makes no sense, right? In the picture for the next page, when I was thinking about it, whenever I read these psukim, I don't know why, because this is not something we did in my family, but I always think of Mother's Day, right? On Mother's Day, in my house, it was just cards. But somehow when I think of Kain and Hevel, I almost feel like Kain ran to the local market, right? I don't even know what it's called in England, your local markets. I would say the makulet, but whatever your typical supermarket is. And do you have Duncan Hines? I actually, as I put that in there, I don't even know if you guys have like pre-made boxes. I'm assuming it goes international. But so let's say it's Mother's Day, you run out and you quickly grab a Duncan Hines cake and you throw it together in a disposable tin and you make it for your mother. And then your sister's watching or your brother's watching. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're right. It's Mother's Day. I should do something nice for mommy because she's amazing. So he or she makes this magnificent cake from scratch, right? With these gorgeous chocolate displays coming out of the top, right? Any good mommy who walks into the house on Mother's Day and sees a Duncan Hines mix in a 9x13 next to that gorgeous cake, I'm not denying that she may want the gorgeous cake more, but she would take a bite of both, right? Why did God not take a bite of both? And I think what's so important, and this is what I meant, that I think the story of Cain and Hevel helps us understand so many different issues in Judaism, is I think this is a question we ask God all the time, not specifically about a tefillah, but there are so many times that we look up at God and you say, seriously? Right? This is what you're going to do? Seriously? This was your choice, God? Of all the things you could or could not have done, seriously? But I think what's amazing about this story is Hashem says, usually you don't get to see what I see. And so you can judge me and you can say what you want to say, but you don't see what I see. But this time Hashem says, since it's the beginning, I want you to see. I want you to see what I see. And it shows us his reaction, right? When Cain's gift was rejected, it says, Vayichar l'Cain ma'od. Cain was livid. Vayiplu panav, and his face falls, right? I always see that as like a jaw drop, like in shock that he was not accepted. And I think back to my Mother's Day example, and I think in those first 10 seconds, not even 30 seconds, the first 10 seconds, if you made someone something or gave them a gift and they rejected it, they tossed the 9x13 into the garbage. In those first 10-second knee-jerk emotional reaction, it shouldn't be anger. The first 10 seconds is hurt. You're actually in pain that your gift was rejected. Then it develops into anger, right? Once you have enough time, your ego takes over and you go into anger mode. But if you are angry in those first immediate knee-jerk seconds, then it kind of tells us a lot about your gift. It infers that your gift wasn't at all about the person you were giving it to. It was totally about you. You wanted the validation. You wanted to be acknowledged. And therefore, the rejection is not about the gift you wanted to do for that person, but rather about you. And therefore, here in this pasuk, Hashem teaches us twofold. Number one, that we are always missing a piece of the story, that we can assume and make judgments and say, literally, God, you could have saved Hevel's life. Because if this part of the story didn't happen, who knows if Cain would have even killed him? But Hashem saying to us, you don't see what I see. You're always missing a piece. So don't judge me because you don't have my perspective. And secondly, he teaches us such an important lesson definitely on tefillah, but I think of all mitzvot, the concept of kavanah, the concept of intention, because based on these words, Vayichar l'Cain ma'od, we see that Cain's intention was definitely not for God. It was not to give God a gift. It was, I want to be acknowledged for giving a gift. And therefore, I'm angry that I was totally passed over on that, right? Vayiplu panav, and he's literally in shock because never before in his life has he ever been rejected or even come in second. So this is shocking, right? So God gets involved. We continue in our path of the story. Pasuk Vav, Vayomer Hashem el Cain. Hashem comes to Cain and he says, Lama charolach v'lama naflu fanecha. Cain, why are you so angry? And why are you in shock? Pasuk Zayin, Halo im titiv se'et, v'im lo titiv, lepetach hatat rovetz. He says, Cain, I'm going to teach you literally the key to the insides of humans, right? If you want to fix this, hello imtitiv, if you want to improve this, se'et, you will be successful. But imlotitiv, if you don't fix this and improve it, la petach chatat rovetz, sin is waiting at the entrance, rovetz, it's like crouching to pounce you. Ve'elecha teshukato. Oh, I don't know why it's missing. I'm so sorry. Part of the pasuk is missing. Ve'elecha teshukato. Its sole focus is on you. Va'atatim shalbo, and you can rule over it. Right. So most mefarshim interpret this pasuk as the description of the Yetzer Hara versus the Yetzer Hatov, our evil inclination versus our good inclination, right? What is Hashem saying? That literally, I think, so apropos that that picture of cake is right above it. It's the perfect depiction of any diet, of any concept of willpower, right? There is a part of you inside that wants something. And literally la petach hatat rovates, the evil inclination just sits in wait and waiting for you to give it the smallest opening, and it's going to jump. But Hashem says, I'm God and I designed you. So yes, I designed the evil inclination, and you will have desires and you will have things you want that are not good for you. But I'm telling you, atatim shalbo, I am telling you as the designer of humans that willpower can be stronger than even the greatest desire. But it's up to you, because willpower is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it will get. The less you use it, the weaker and literally mush it'll be, right? So it's up to you, Cain. Meaning, Pasuk Zayin to me is so huge because Cain hasn't sinned yet, right? I hear that his korban could have been better. I hear that he didn't have wonderful intention. All true. None of that was a sin, right? None of that is yet a mistake. But God is warning him, and he's saying, Cain, I see you. I see what's happening. Sin is waiting at the door to pounce you. It's literally, I see you're seething. I see something's going to unfold, and I'm begging you to hold it together. I'm begging you, Cain, hold it together and fix this, because you can. I'm your biggest cheerleader. I am God. I'm your designer. I'm your biggest cheerleader. And I'm telling you, you can fix this. And then, Pasuk Chet, the climax of our story, Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. Cain says to his brother Hevel, Vayehi biyotam basadeh, while they are in the field, Vayakam Cain el Hevel achiv yargehu. And Cain gets up on his brother and it kills him. Right. And this time I didn't delete something from the pasuk, right? The last one, I apologize. I was missing four words. I'm not missing any words here, but look how odd. The pasuk says to me, Cain says to his brother Hevel while they're in the field, and Cain gets up on his brother and he kills him. You're going to tell me about the first murder in world history. You're going to tell me that Cain ultimately murders his own brother. And you're going to tell me that he says something to his brother, but you're not going to tell me what he said, right? It's like shocking. It's jarring. You read this pasuk and you almost have to read it 3 or 4 times because you're just like, I missed something. I'm confused, right? Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. Cain says to Hevel, and God, you're not going to tell me what he said? What does that mean? Right? What happened in that field? Right. And so you go to the Mefarshim and it's rough. It's rough. I'm telling you, if you open up the Chumash, it is hard because there is no conversation. Right. And most Mefarshim will tell you, go look in Midrash. Right. The Midrashim come up with incredible hypothetical conversations between Cain and Hevel. Some are more famous than others. I left here one of the more famous ones, that they fought over 3 things, whether they fought over the division of the lands of the world, who would get which area. They fought over where the Beit HaMikdash would be built and whose different area of land the Beit HaMikdash, or they fought over Chava, who would get to be with their mother or a sister in theory, right? And that midrash, I think, is incredibly powerful because every midrash is meant to give you a figurative message. Some are also meant to be taken literally. I think this particular midrash is there to teach us an incredible figurative message, helping us understand that murder or war could or would take place over 3 major things: money, religion, and sex/women, right? This concept of those 3 being incredibly powerful, charged elements in humanity, it could cause murder. But it still doesn't really tell me what the conversation was. And I think, thank God, we are blessed in a time that if we aren't comfortable learning Midrash, we often open Rashi and assume he selected the best one for us, right? He already did the dirty work. We'll look into Rashi to see what Midrash fits into the text the best. And Rashi, one of my favorite lines of Rashi here, he says, V'yesh bazeh agada. If you want, there are Midrashim here, right? Why doesn't Rashi give me one? right? Why doesn't the text give me one? And I think what Rashi is teaching us in that line is what I believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us in this line. Hashem says, I don't actually want you to know what they spoke about, because it's always a they, right? Every midrash, every hypothetical is that Cain says something to Hevel, but every midrash has Hevel responding back to Cain, right? Whether Cain said, I spoke to God and he told me I could fix this, right? He told me I could bring a new carbon and then he'll accept it, right? But he doesn't then murder Hevel. First, Hevel says something back, right? And whatever Hevel says and responds back, it pushes Cain's button to a point that he kills him, right? Meaning, as someone who grew up loving Law and Order as one of my favorite shows on television, right? Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv, a good defense attorney would find those midrashim and say, well, Hevel did X, Y, and Z, and Hevel said, A, B, and C, and therefore I'm going to throw the victim under the bus. I'm going to tell you what Hevel did wrong to push Cain's button enough to get him to kill his own brother, right? And Hashem, and I think what Rashi is helping us see is, what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying? I don't want you to see the conversation because I don't need you throwing Hevel under the bus. I don't need you telling me why what Hevel said pushed Cain's button. You're right, he probably did. But does that change the fact that Cain murdered his own brother? It doesn't. So I don't want a defense attorney. I don't want you telling me what Hevel did wrong. I want you to see that Cain said something and ultimately he killed his brother. Right? But then that brings us back to the question, then why tell me there was a conversation? If you don't want me to know about the conversation, why tell me there was a conversation? And again, it brings me right back to Law and Order. Somehow this TV show just pops itself up so much in these psukim for me, right? Why? Because if it didn't tell me Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv, but it just told me God gives him a pep talk, and then he goes out into the field and he kills his brother, that's psychopathic behavior, right? There was no instigation. There was no anything to adrenaline rush him. There was no, it's premeditated on a so much larger of a scale. And therefore it makes Cain seem literally crazy that he killed his brother. But if I tell you, no, he went to the field to talk to Hevel. But while there, a conversation ensued. And while conversation ensued, it pushed Cain's button enough that he ultimately killed Hevel. Then all of a sudden, Cain's relatable. All of a sudden, I look at Cain and I say, oh, any human could get to a point that our buttons are pushed to an extent that we could actually take the life of another human being. And all of a sudden, Cain's not crazy and Cain's not an extreme. Cain could be any one of us who is pushed to a certain point, right? And ultimately was pushed to a point that he gets up and murders his own brother, right? So we continue on the story. Pasuk Tet, Vayomer Hashem el Cain, right? After he just killed Hevel, Hashem comes to Cain and he says, hey, Hevel achicha, Cain, where's your brother Hevel? Vayomer, and Cain responds and says, Lo yadati, I don't know. Hashomer achi anochi? What am I, my brother's keeper, right? Am I supposed to keep tabs, right? We're going to analyze Cain's response in a second, but first I want to talk about God's response because it's mind-blowing, right? Most people look at it and say, oh, the famous idea that Rashi always brings in, if God asks a question he knows the answer to, he's giving you the door to do tshuva, he's opening it as a conversation so that you can admit what you did. And now I totally agree and I totally appreciate that. But for me, it brings me back to 7th grade. When I was in 7th grade, in the same week, I got my first D on a report card, which obviously no one was going to be happy about. And sadly, in the same week, and I've asked him his permission, it's okay to say, my brother lied to my parents about something big. Now, my mom dealt with both of those situations. Both my parents did, but somehow my mom's vision comes more strongly. Now, for me, I will never forget when my mom walked into my room to say, Sepha, how are you doing in history? How's history going for you? Right? And she calmly engaged in a conversation about why I was not doing well in history. But when my brother lied, there was no calm of my mom walking into his room to try to unpack it. It was the first time I understood the phrase steam coming out of someone's ears, right? Like literally the house shook of my mother being, the one thing in this house is you cannot lie, and literally lost it on my brother, right? And so when I look at Pasuk Tet, it kind of sounds like my history class, right? It kind of sounds like my mother, hey, Havel Achicha, where's your brother Havel? Like, oh, Cain, how'd you do in history? Right? But if I'm thinking of the level of the crime, it doesn't sound to me like murder should be comparable to failing history. I would assume it's more like that Kav Ha'adom, the red line that my brother crossed, of murder, of lying, of a big deal, right? Why is God so calm? Right? It's almost anticlimactic of what Cain did. But then we go to Cain's response to him, right? God is calm, which is strange. And then Cain's response is also so interesting. He says, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Now, most see this as chutzpahdik, that he's being very rude to God, or he doesn't understand that God sees everything. But I actually think it's so much more simple. Cain has never seen death. He's never experienced death. He doesn't understand the concept of mortality. So to him, I think he's actually being really honest in this line, right? He says to God, oh, where's Hevel? I don't know. I left him in the field. Yes, he was bleeding. Yes, he was unconscious. Yes, I beat him up or whatever he did to him. But I don't know. It's been a half hour. I assume he got up and he left. I don't know. Maybe he went that way, right? Meaning I think he's being genuine, which is also why I think God is so calm, because I think God understands that Cain has no understanding of what he just did, right? And that's why he's opening in this calm way, and Cain is in this calm response, because I don't think Cain has a clue at the gravity of what he did. And what we're about to watch is God trying to explain it to him, right? So now we get into Pasuk Yud. Yomer, and he says, Meh asita, right? Hashem looks at him and he says, Cain, what have you done? Your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground, right? Cain understands he's not getting back up, right? This was final. This was mortality in its core essence. Pasuk Yud va'ata, and now arur ata, you are now cursed. Min ha'adama asher patztat piyah lekachat et mei achicha miyadecha, you are cursed from the land that opened her mouth to accept your brother's blood from you. Pasuk Yud bet ki ta'avod et adama, you will work the land, but lo tosef ted kochalach. Navanati ba'aretz, right? He says, you're going to work the land, but it will not give of its strength to you. You will be a wanderer in the land, right? So meaning, number one, he explains to him, the blood is now absorbed into the ground. He's not coming back up. You have literally created a finality in a human that there is no continuum. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to change. But what's your punishment, right? Your punishment is twofold, right? You're going to work the land. I'm not changing your job, but you will never get full satisfaction of it. It will never give of its strength to you. You will never make six figures, so to speak, right? And navanad tiyeh ba'aretz, you will be a wanderer in the land, right? It could be cause and effect, right? You're going to work the land. It's not going to give of its strength to you. So you're going to keep moving in hopes that the next place will do better. Or both. You'll never feel comfort. You'll never feel settled. You will just aimlessly live your life and never feel fruition of literally the fruits of your labor in a good way, right? And what's so interesting also is this validates the whole idea that Cain didn't understand before what he did, because this is a really nice punishment, right? In Judaism, we believe a life for a life, right? We believe, based in Shalmata, if someone is found guilty of murder, that they get one of the mitzvot based in, right? They are killed for it. And here Hashem doesn't kill him. He not only doesn't kill him, it's a pretty lax punishment in comparison. but it's helping us understand that Cain did not understand what he was doing. And therefore, it's a decently nice punishment. But what happens? What does Cain respond? And we're only going to see it through the eyes of a Ramban for time's sake. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayomer Cain el Hashem. Cain responds after hearing this, after understanding, and he says, Gadol avonim and so, right? Hanachon bapshat shehu vidui. He's literally doing what we hopefully spent hours doing yesterday, admitting his mistake. Gadol avonim and so, my sin is too great to carry, God. I cannot believe it. Now that I understand what I did, oh my God, I cannot believe it, right? The charata, the regret is settling in. The magiali of the punishment is setting in. And now he's saying, okay, l'kabel ha'atid, right? I want to fix my future. So what does he say to God? You're right. You're right. Kick me out of this land. Hide your face from me. And you're right. I should be a wanderer in the lands. But God, right? Once other people understand what I did, they'll want vengeance. They'll want me dead, right? Because magiali. Right, I'm doing tshuva. I understand the extent of what I did, and I'm so sorry. Right, so what does Hashem say? You're right, you're forgiven. Pasuk Tetvav, I will take that part away. Vayomer lo Hashem, and Hashem responds, Lachain, therefore, kol horei kayin shivatayim yukam. Right, for 7 generations, I will protect you. Vayasem Hashem lekayin ot lebilti akoto tokomotzo, and Hashem puts a sign on him so that no one will kill him. And obviously, that would be a whole nother shiur. So I'm sorry that we're going to just overlook that to an extent. And then, but here's to me the magical part of our story, right? Because I could totally tie this into tshuva, and I could totally say this was perfect. What a great ending for Yom Kippur. But it's not where the story ends. The story continues. Pasuk Tedvav. Vayomer, sorry. Pasuk Tetzayin. Vayetze Cain milifnei Hashem. Cain leaves from being before God. And start with my visualization. We all left shul yesterday, right? We did our vidui, we did our tshuva, and then we leave shul. And hopefully we're making our sukkahs, we're doing other things. But what happens? Vayeshev be'eretz Nod, Kidmat Eden. So far, so good. He moves to the city of Nod, right? A play on words, Navanad, east of Eden. Okay, so far, so good. But then, Pasuk Yud Zayin, Vayeta Cain atishto. Cain sleeps with his wife, Vatahar, she gets pregnant, Vatelet et Chanoch, she gives birth to Chanoch. Okay, so far I could assume this is just going to be a story of genealogy, and that's okay. But then, Vayihi bo na'ir, he builds a city. Vayikra shem ha'ir kishem beno Chanoch, and he names the city after his son, Chanoch, aka he built the city. He established the city. He lives in the city long enough for him to name it after his child. And now I look back at this nice punishment I saw just a minute ago, and I said it was so generous of God. It was so nice that he wasn't going to settle down, and he would always have to move, and he would work but never really feel good about his work. And now it feels like his punishment just vanished, because Pasuk Yud Zayin is the antithesis. He builds a city. He establishes himself. He creates a legacy. Everything I thought was part of his punishment, he does the opposite. Mind-blowing. No reaction of God. The psukim that I put in smaller, font is literally just the genealogy of the next 7 generations, right? Until ultimately, after 7 generations, he is killed. And then, Pasuk Chaf Hey, random, Vayeda Adam od et ishto. Adam sleeps with his wife again. Vateled ben. They give birth to another son. Vatikrach Moshet. They name their 3rd child Shet, or in English Seth. Kishat li Elokim zera acher. Because God granted us another child, Tachat Hevel, to replace Hevel ki hargo Cain, because Cain killed him. Right? And it's just like, wait, what? So I want to bring you a midrash, and I know we're tight on time, but I'm going to hopefully pull it all together in 3 or 4 minutes for you. But I'm telling you, for me, this midrash was life-altering. It shifted everything, not only about Cain, but about tshuva and about the days that we just finished to help us go into the days of Sukkot. Says the midrash. First, the midrash asks the question, where were Adam and Chava, right? We read this entire story. We learned the story of Cain and Hevel. And nowhere in their story were their parents, right? Even Pasuk Aleph that mentioned them, we highlighted, it didn't even take place here. It happens in Gan Eden. Where were they? Says the Midrash, Adam was crying for 130 years over the fact that he ate from that tree, right? He literally sat in corner for 130 years crying. And then the Midrash continues on the words, Vayetze Cain milifnei Hashem, that Cain leaves God, gets married, has a kid, builds a city. And then says the Midrash, lo and behold, who does he bump into? Daddy. He bumps into Adam. He bumps into Adam, and Adam says to him, Cain, I don't understand. You murdered your brother and you're walking around like nothing happened. You're building a city. You're having a fabulous life. I don't understand. How could this be? Cain looks at his father and he says, oh, I did tshuva. Adam looks at Cain and says, tshuva? What do you think I've been doing for the last 130 years? I've been doing tshuva. I've been crying and doing tshuva, and I won't live my life the way you have. And Cain says, Dad, that is not tshuva. That's self-loathing. That's the Yetzer Hara, but that is not tshuva. Tshuva is introspecting and looking at yourself and saying, what midah, what characteristic got me to a point that I committed whatever the mistake was? And Cain says, if you look at my story, what was my character flaw? I was a narcissist. I was so self-absorbed between being the firstborn, being named Cain, and thinking I'm the end all be all, that I was inheriting the family business, that the first time that I was rejected, the first time I wasn't number one, I was so angry and jealous, I murdered my own brother. So he said, what did I have to do? I had to fix that element of narcissism and self-focus. So what did I do? I got married and I had a child, right? Because those of us who are blessed to be parents know that being a parent means you are altruistic. It means your needs come second. That when there's someone else that you love in that way, that I don't care how tired I am. If my kid wakes me up at 2 a.m. because he's sick, I'm going to get out of bed and help him. And if I'm hungry, but my kid is hungry, I'm going to make sure my kid has something to eat. Right? He said, I had a child and I actually was a parent to that child. And then what did I name my kid? Chanoch, to educate. Because what was I missing? No one taught me. No one educated me on what I needed to do and how to be in this world. And then what was the act number 3? Bona Ir, I built a city. Because the concept of a city is the concept and appreciation of diversity, that you need a garbage man as much as you need the mailman, as much as you need the doctor, as much as you need the teacher, as much as you need the lawyer. And there is no better or worse, because everyone's important for society to survive and to flourish. And finally, what did I name the city? Chanoch. I named it after my child, because all the narcissists of Tanakh or world history, Caesarea, Herodian, Alexandria, right? I can look at the world and I see many cities named after narcissists, but there was no city, Cain. He named his city Chanoch, the concept of educating the next generation. And he said, that's why I was able to move on. And you're right. If I could go back in time, I would imagine Cain saying, I wish it didn't have to be that I killed Hevel. I wish Hevel was still alive. But that mistake was the worst day of my life, but it became the best day of my life, because it helped me turn my life around and become the person that I am, the person that we are all descendants from, right? Noach's wife, Naamah, is a descendant of Cain, right? As we exit the Yamim Noraim, as we walk out of shul, of yesterday, of the intensity of Yom Kippur and the intensity of Rosh Hashanah, we are begging ourselves to introspect and say, I don't want to wallow in my own self-pity. I don't want to be crying over all the mistakes that I made last year or the last 40 plus years of my life. I want to be able to look at myself and say, oh, now that I know what got me there, let yesterday, whether it was hard or challenging or full of despair, let it push me into mamash, the joy of Sukkot, because what is the joy? That I'm going to actualize my potential. I am going to make God so proud and want to be hugging me, sitting in my sukkah with me, because I am no longer the person I was yesterday. I'm the person that's going to take all the mistakes I made and use them as an impetus to bring out the best self, my best me. And therefore, I hope that Kayin for us is not a story of a murderer or a horrible man why he survived and doesn't get destroyed by God, for us to unpack, but really for us to look at him as someone who is an inspiration, someone we can look to as a model for ourselves to say, this is who I want to emulate, because I'm going to take the worst mistakes I ever made and push them to make me the best person I can possibly be. Please, God. Bezrat Hashem. And now, any questions or any sources you want, anything you wanted to know? Simcha. I don't know how to stop sharing though. Hold on. I'm gonna look to see how I can do that. Nope.
Hold on, let's see if I can do that.
I was about to say, I'm hoping that Rabbi Wilkinson can.
I'm just trying to see how to do it myself. So,
I think I'm so used to just ending the.
right. Okay. So there we are. There we are.
Okay.
Perfect. Managed to find a way to do it. I'm bowled over. I don't know if anyone else is, but I don't know if there are any questions come. But I'm just, what a wonderful way to take that lesson. It's just phenomenal. And we all, it's a story we all know. And I must say that one of the joys why I love teaching Torah is every time you look at Torah, you find something different and you learn something different. And I think being a lawyer, a lot of my emphasis has been possibly because of influences of Elie Wiesel, etc. I keep talking about, and I apologize to the killer that I keep talking about Elie Wiesel at the moment, will end at this defense of the murder trial. But you having gone on with the additional posset is just absolutely blown me away. And yes, but I'm aware of the Medrash about meeting Adam, but I hadn't actually thought it through the way you explained it. So it really, I've taken a lot from that, and I think it's absolutely inspirational. I think it's an incredible lesson for us, going from yesterday to the end of the week to Sukkot and going through the year. Lessons to learn and take with us, and I think it's brilliant, and I've really enjoyed meeting you and learning from you, and I'm sure I'm not on my own on that, and I know some of my colleagues who will be hopefully watching the video will no doubt be agreeing with me. But Yeshko, it was absolutely brilliant, and I really do appreciate it. I don't know if anyone is going to come with a question, but I just want to say how much I personally appreciated that, and thank you so much.
And so I'm just going to add that it's a completely different way of looking at things, and also, even if you didn't have such a good Yom Kippur, it sort of gives you hope that you can rethink what I should have thought yesterday, but I didn't think yesterday. And as you say, by the time we come to sit in our sukkah, please God, I'll be a different person.
Amen. Agreed.
Thank you so much. It really was inspirational. I'd heard a lot of the stories before, but never ever brought together in that way with that lesson in it. And I just perhaps both. Sorry, my husband's sitting here as well. Both thought it was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you very much. Bezrat Hashem will be meeting you again. Either we'll come to Eretz Yisrael, which is our aim, but if not,
love it.
If not, we'll either on Zoom or some other way we'll host you here. But it's certainly someone we would want to continue learning from going forward. Thank you so much. It really is.
My home in Efrat is also always open. So anyone who is coming to Israel, you are welcome to reach out, and happy to host you.
Thank you so much. Wish you a good year and wish everyone a healthy, happy year.
Amen. Gemar Chatima Tova. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Brilliant.